Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome to another edition of Discuss Detroit. My name is Jeanette Pierce, and today I'm going to be talking to Rebecca Binno Savage, who is the Vice President of the Detroit Area Art Deco Society and one of the most impactful preservationists in Detroit. So if you don't know her name, you really should, and we're going to talk about all sorts of projects that she's worked on. Hi, Rebecca. How are you today?
Hi, Jeanette. I'm good, thanks.
Thanks so much for joining me.
Mhm.
As we were talking just in prep, I mean, it's just amazing how time flies, right? A couple decades or more, even working on all these historic buildings around the city, and I just want to start off by saying thank you for all the work that you've done, and it really has had a huge impact. So why don't you go ahead and tell us your 2-minute life story? Tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I was born in Detroit and attended Wayne State University, got a degree in business, and I worked in advertising for 9 years, and then decided to get a degree in historic preservation. So I went away to school to Columbia University and got a preservation degree, and came back and started working at the Greater Downtown Partnership. So there I got to work on all kinds of downtown projects. I worked on creating a National Register historic district on Woodward. And from there have worked in kind of different capacities, doing a lot of historic designation, mostly so that developers could use the historic tax credit. So yeah, I've gotten to see places and projects that I started working on a long time ago really today turn around. For example, Shinola Hotel's one of those that it's beyond what I ever expected it to be.
Yeah, in the rail building from 1915, right? That's the
Got it, right.
So, you mentioned that the historic district designation, and so that's what we were talking about, how we kind of first, or I remember first meeting you when we opened the Welcome Center on Woodward in what had been the Woolworth space, part of the Woolworth space. Right. And you were so awesome, and you brought the entire, like, it was this thick of the application for the Lower Woodward Historic Corridor District. And for me, and you said obviously it helps developers, and it does, but it is also just a treasure trove for architectural and history nerds like myself and like a lot of folks out there, because a lot of those, and this was for the younger folks out there, this was pre Google having all the answers to everything too, right? So
that is right. Yeah.
And for some of these smaller buildings, like, yes, even then, like, you might have been able to easily find some information on the Penobscot, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but, a big, huge skyscraper. But some of those smaller buildings along Woodward,
right.
I mean, your research is, made it really accessible for people to learn about things.
Yeah. So, for example, the Singer Building, a small Art Deco building, was designated contributing. So I got to have that be architecturally significant building, and is now included in the Shinola Hotel project.
Well, because so many of those buildings were empty. I mean, almost. I mean, especially. Yeah. I mean, almost. I mean, I don't know if you have a percentage, but I'd venture to guess 75% of the buildings around that, in the couple blocks, and we're talking from State. It's a 2-block. Is it a 2-block district?
Yeah, so kind of from Campus Marshes up to Grand Circuit Park.
Oh, yeah. the whole thing. Okay, yeah. Actually, and also fun story for you. I actually met my husband on a tour I was doing of the Lower Woodward Historic District for the Detroit Historical Society. So, and I think I was inspired. I was like, oh, I can do, like this whole, like that could be a name of, the district that I'm going to do. And so I just thought about that was your inspiration there.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about the Art Deco Society. And it's a really great organization. I feel a lot of people might really not know much about it.
Okay, I'll show our magazine comes out once a year for 2 members. And so we it's a kind of smallish group. We've got about 250 members, but it's really for people that are interested in architecture from, say, we classify about 1925 to 1945. And it's really buildings with that kind of modernistic style. So buildings that really kind of were forward thinking. So instead of referring to the past, but looking to the future. So in Detroit, we think about the Guardian Building, the Penobscot Building, David Stott Building. Those are our stars. Yeah, so we've really kind of emphasized that era of architecture, and we also include lectures and different kind of different aspects of Art Deco. So we've had lectures on the antiques, on the fashion. Yeah, it's a fun group. I like it.
I mean, really, again, for the history, architecture, lovers out there, or people just like beautiful things. I mean, Detroit has some of the most amazing architecture in the country, if
That's
not
right.
the world. And I know it's easy for us to say this because, we're in it and we're in Detroit, but I also think it's important to let people know who maybe, like, when you work with people from around the country or the world, they know about Detroit's architecture. And when they come here, they are really impressed about it, even though they come from New York or Prague for whatever, And I think that we take it for granted as locals or people. Like, growing up here, I didn't really hear much about it. It wasn't something. It was not really talked about a lot, and so
Right. I think we do take it for granted. I think we
yeah.
do, Jeanette. So, and buildings like, say, the Guardian Building, it's always been open. It was never threatened or really endangered. So, in that way, this is one of the world's most beautiful Art Deco buildings, and it's really well preserved and well maintained. We should be really proud of it.
And I mean, when we take, at Detroit Experience Factory, we've taken 130,000 people around the city now, plus that was like last time we counted at the end of that last year. But many of the tours go into the Guardian Building or talk about the Guardian Building, and even though we focus on locals are amazed. They walk in and they go, "How come I lived here and didn't know about this?" And I think, but people from out of town, they'll be like, "I want to see the Guardian Building." Like, they've researched what they need to see and go to, and so sometimes they have a little bit more, up on what the big stuff is, and locals are just like drive by it every day and don't really notice it. So,
we still have Art Deco buildings that need to be restored.
yeah.
So there's buildings that are kind of on that cusp of list. So I'm thinking of like the Broadhead Armory. That's one that really needs to be restored. And even the Penobscot Building, that's one of our major skyscrapers, and that can really use some investment and some upgrades to bring it to that Class A office space.
Well, and the Broadhead Armory, just for people, that is just almost to Belle Isle, or around Belle Isle Bridge, right?
Right by the bridge.
And Joe Louis used to box there, I think, if I remember right.
Right, that's right.
And so, go ahead.
So you're showing a picture of my little book I co-authored, one of the Arcadia Publishing books on Art Deco in Detroit. I only wish this book could have been in color. In those early days of Arcadia, they didn't have a color option, but yeah, so it really just focuses on Detroit's Art Deco style buildings. So,
and you can see the Penobscot here in this photo of the book with a little bit of the Guardian. And I'm assuming many people are familiar with some of these. We do an art and architecture tour every Sunday that's now being done virtually, which is actually pretty cool. So we talk about a lot of these, but I think it is important to mention, like as you said, with the Penobscot, because it hasn't been abandoned, but it doesn't mean it couldn't use some TLC. Also, I always like to point out about the Penobscot. It's one of my kind of fun little, I'll ask people on tours if anyone been in the Penobscot, and people will raise their hand, locals. And then I'll be like, how many people realize it was 3 separate buildings, right? That, so only the Penobscot Tower would be considered Art Deco,
Art Deco, right. Another Art Deco star in Detroit is on the east side. That's the Vanity Ballroom. Yes. So the Vanity Ballroom is beautiful. It's now in the hands of a nonprofit that's has been focusing on raising funds for restoration, but it's just kind of hanging on. It's, it's just in need of some serious investment.
Well, and it can be, I mean, so the Jefferson East Inc. is the nonprofit that's now kind of, which is such a great, when it gets into the right hands, is such an important part, obviously, of buildings. I mean, it doesn't mean it's the end all be all. It's still a lot of work and time and money and all of that. but I think it could really be an anchor for, the East Jefferson corridor there
Yeah,
too.
absolutely,
Before
absolutely.
before we leave talking about your book, so it's Art Deco in Detroit, everybody. And what's the best way for you, for people to get it? Do they have it at source booksellers? We'll have to see.
I don't know the answer to that, but it
Yeah,
still is on the Arcadia Publishing website, and I've seen it on Amazon and those places too. So it's a little bit low, the original price from 12 years ago now, so you can get a deal, right?
right.
Yeah.
Well, and if you see a lot of Arcadia books at, even like DeVries, I feel like, and in
Oh
Cheese
yeah.
has, has it. So if you can find it local, we always recommend supporting local. And
Mhm.
I would think Source would have it. They have a whole Arcadia little section there. But so Rebecca, I should have actually started with, she literally wrote the book on Art Deco in Detroit, as one of her many things here. And she was talking about the Penobscot. Here's another really just kind of cool shot. And this is from
Mhm.
Historic Detroit and our good friend Dan Austin, who, if you are interested in a lot of Detroit's historic buildings, he has spent a lot of time and energy researching and and is a great resource for a lot of folks. But here you want to
That's a
tell a
great
little bit
photo.
about what you see in
Well,
this picture?
that's a great photo. So there on Griswold, we've got sort of our Art Deco corridor of skyscrapers. Um, I was talking about the Penobscot building needing some investment. So that lighting that's there right now, it's not always working, or maybe it's just not always turned on. But I'm not sure that it's back 100% as it was in this image. But also in this photo, the David Stott building wasn't occupied, and today it's occupied, all apartments. So yeah, that's the kind of change that we've seen happen really quickly downtown, right? It's really happened just so quickly, and
It's
it's
like
really good news.
it's like a long time, but quickly at the same time, right? So many buildings were vacant for 35 years, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and then,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one of the themes that is repeated is like basically built in the teens or 20s, abandoned in the 70s or 80s, restored in the 2000s, right? So
That's pretty close to Detroit, yeah,
yeah.
downtown, right?
Like, I mean, as I go through, and if I would mention buildings and talk about them on tours, it becomes repetitive kind of, it's like this,
I
this
know.
building was built in 1928. It was abandoned in 1978, restored in 2008
Yeah.
or something.
And there's
Really
buildings
common.
that have come so far, like the Metropolitan Element Hotel, where
Mhm.
what do they call it, Monarch Club, up on those upper stories. That
Yes.
was truly a ruin in Detroit. That was truly just
Trees growing out of the roof. I mean, that kind of stuff, right?
right. It
Yeah.
was truly ruin, and now you can go have a drink on those and watch the Tigers play up from one of those upper story areas, and it is just incredible to see this turnaround. Yeah,
Well,
the,
and the
the Metropolitan,
Metropolitan,
yeah,
yeah,
they gave.
1925, right? I think Metropolitan was built and then
Mhm.
abandoned in the 70s, and it was a
Right.
jewelry store, right? Wasn't it partly jewelry and watches?
Right. Right. That was the kind of our jewelry building. It seemed like most major cities had a 1920s jewelry building, but that was Detroit's. And it, yeah, I give them so much credit for turning that building around. It was where others said no, the Roxbury Group and Eric Means partnership came in and turned it around. Yeah.
Well, and Roxbury did the David Whitney building also, which is
Mhm.
another great restoration
Yeah.
project.
Mhm.
I mean, luckily it had been a little bit more like not, I mean, preserved a little better than say the David Broderick across the street, right?
Yeah.
Like kind of
Right. It
those elements more, but it was still a long, hard fight. Did
was.
you and
Mhm.
in your role in your previous job, you worked on a lot of these projects in kind
Right.
of how would
So,
that work? They'd come to you and say, "We want to
so
do this historic building."
Well, I worked at Kramer Design Group, and so that's an architectural firm in Detroit that kind of has specialized in historic architecture. My role there was working on the historic tax credit applications and did the part one, sometimes based off of the National Register nomination I wrote back in the
Mhm.
day. But sometimes I, had to write from scratch because, well, anyway, so the David Whitney building is one where I also helped the property owner with some research just on the history for their own knowledge. They love the history of the building. Usually when a property owner takes on like that's a $92 million project. They truly fall in love with the building. So they want to see all of that kind of history too. So that's the kind of stuff I've been able to work on. Yeah.
Great.
Look,
I'm gonna ask you a quick question about the David Whitney. Where do you fall on the whole Daniel Burnham? But he had died. But it's still considered a Daniel Burnham building.
okay. So
What's your inside thought on
I've
that?
looked at the original drawings quite a bit, and they're from his firm. But when we looked at the date when those drawings were done, and Daniel Burnham was still alive, and we know that he was very much, someone who reviewed all of the architecture plans going out of his office. I really think he had a hand in how that building was designed. Just even though his signature might not be on the end result of the drawings, but I really think he reviewed and had influence on it.
And it was completed after he died, but like you said, it's a long process to design a building. And I heard that the Daniel Burnham Foundation or Association counts it as a Daniel Burnham building.
They do, right?
So,
yeah. I
so,
like this debate, Jeanette. I can debate this with you all day long, right?
no, I mean, it's just fun. I mean, most people don't notice or don't think about it, but again, for folks of us to dive into it, and a lot of times I'll tell people on tours about, if you're not familiar with architecture and you don't know much about architecture or architects, but you want to sound like you do, Daniel Burnham's a really good place to start. He was the big deal and kind of like the father of the skyscraper. And we have 3 Daniel Burnham buildings, of course, in Detroit that are left. But one building that is not as, I feel like hasn't gotten very much attention at all, but is absolutely beautiful. And the restoration has been really great is the Farwell building in Capitol Park.
Right. So that's a 1915 building that, again, was in that classification of ruin. Absolutely a ruin. You kind of took your life in your hands walking through there. So it was a true comeback story. So the firm Build Tech was the company that took on this project, and there it is, kind of in the battle days. I first went in there in about 1998, and all of those, there were little tiles by the Tiffany Studios, were all on the ground. So you walk through and you're crunching onto the glass tiles because they
glass
anyway,
tiles.
Yeah,
wow.
It was just a ruin, but it's beautifully restored. Wonderful restaurant, Layla, on the first floor, and that's another one. Thanks for the after picture. It really turned around. I mean, Detroit 2.0's happened, right?
Yeah, well, and I mean, obviously there's nothing is like, totally simple, but I mean, the fights that we would have back in the day to save buildings that we lost. I felt like we lost it certainly emotionally felt like we were losing battles, with the Madison Lennox, right? The Madison Lennox being that, it was on the
Tiger
national
Stadium stage,
right,
our opening day. Yeah, Tiger Stadium's one.
Lafayette building. I mean, Lafayette building I felt was extra painful because, and if you want to talk, hear someone really talk about it, Dan Austin will tell you a little bit about the Lafayette building.
I know, he worked on trying to save it. Yeah. I know. That's one that it was just at that kind of right at that borderline of making it. Well,
no, but for the way I understand it too, like, because we had just done, and obviously I'm not working on it, but I really feel like we as in this, like the city as a whole, like restoring a building kind of, so I don't, it's just funny that I say we all the time. I'd be like, we did this as a city. I didn't have anything to do with it, but Cadillac Hotel obviously was kind of like the first like huge major, project, 455 hotel rooms completely abandoned for decades, all that stuff. But then I felt like that they were the ones that actually pushed for the Lafayette destruction. And I thought it would actually be more helpful. It'd be like, oh, look, it's an example of this is what you can do, right? You can save something. But I guess they didn't want guests looking at this abandoned building across the street. And it's like,
yeah, I know.
on, right?
I know. Today we can't believe it. That was the attitude at the time. But it's a tragic loss again. I kind of think we need to. I try to focus on the things we have and the things that can be turned around, and Yeah, that's where I come back to like some of our music history too. The Grandy Ballroom, that's a good one that could really use the investment. Wonderful music history there. Yeah, we've got a lot of these. A
And
lot
we
of
have
these.
saved a lot. I mean, that's also one of the points too, is like though it felt like we were losing some battles overall, and this is where having the context where people come from other places, and sometimes I remember
Mm,
these New Yorkers came, and it was probably like right in that like 2009, time frame, and I was talking with them, and they're like, "Oh my God, you guys have so many of your old buildings left. Great job." And I was like, still reeling over the loss of some other buildings.
I
But it
know.
really did put it in perspective because, we have not only saved, I mean, and now we've restored them. There's a difference between saving them, but having them not fully be restored, but waiting
Mm,
to be, and then, or still possibly being torn down, hopefully not. But I always say that one of the silver linings to the disinvestment in the city was
mm.
that there wasn't the demand for the land, or there wasn't the money to tear things down. Hurry up and tear it
That's
down.
part of the reason. Yeah, that's part of the reason. And so, it took a lot of people doing groundbreaking work. For example, on Woodward, we were talking about it earlier, the Showstack firm, they were able to, convert those retail buildings to lofts when it was, no one else had done that downtown. So they
Yeah.
really were, yeah, along with the Farbman Group, worked across the street. So it was really, that's going back 20 years now. People with that kind of vision set the
Yeah.
groundwork for others to come along
Yeah, I
later.
mean, yeah, more than, I mean, a little bit more than, I mean,
Yeah,
Lofts of Merchants Row was the first, well, Lofts of Woodward Center opened with 60
yeah,
units in like 2002. And
yeah,
then right
right,
after that, Lofts of Merchants Row with 157 in 2003. And
yeah.
then you mentioned while we were pre-chatting about one of the early projects you worked on was the Kales. Can you talk a little bit about what that was
Mhm.
like 22 years ago or however many?
Right. So it was about 23 years ago. The city offered the Kales Building and the Statler Hotel each. You could have had one or the other for the low price of $100,000. Yeah.
Wow.
But of course, the money to restore those buildings, they're on the west side of Woodward, west side of Grand Circus Park. No one else had done it yet, so banks were not too eager to lend for any developers working on those properties. So it was tough, and so we lost the Statler Hotel, and Kales Building's restored, and now something's being constructed on that site of the Statler, new construction today, finally. But yeah, it really took a lot to, yeah, to
Get
get to
people
this
to
point where we are.
imagine. Yeah. I mean, when we were
Right.
doing those early tours, we would take, I had a key and a key fob to the model at the Lost Merchants Row, because we would take people in to show them like, this is what a loft is. I mean,
Right.
it was something out of the knowledge or the,
Yeah.
of Detroiters, especially Metro Detroiters. And so it's like, and then I'd be like, imagine you can walk this place, why, you know, one of the biggest things of starting Detroit Experience Factory always was using the word I live here. I walk here. I go here. It's not this, I heard somebody does it. I mean, I wouldn't do it kind of concept. Right. And as a lifelong resident too, that was, really important, but showing people what was possible. Um, it was just a whole nother world back then.
Right. We could talk about the old days of 20 years ago.
Right. There's
Right.
so many.
It was a different place, different mindset too. Right. So
Yeah.
here we are today, and downtown's kind of finished. Our downtown's almost finished. So there's just, now we have to think about the outer ring. So maybe kind of west of Corktown or north of Corktown.
Well,
Um,
I mean, west side of downtown still had, like between, I mean, the Gar building was a huge, awesome win. And again, great guys that, that did that. I mean, so that was cool. And obviously with, Beacon Park, like this is amazing when we actually are taking surface parking lots and
right.
putting things on them like the Z Garage or the Beacon Park. But I feel like there's still a lot of surface parking. I mean, they
I know.
did restore that Art Deco DTE did that build that all Art
So
Deco
that was the
building in there.
Salvation Army building. That was one of the
Right.
Salvation Army's headquarters buildings. I wish the public could go inside. My Art Deco Society scheduled a tour, and we got to tour around. And they beautifully restored that little building there. I think that's Grand River and maybe Cass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
good.
DTE really beautifully restored that Art Deco building, and I wish it was. Well, it's their office space. I can understand why the public
Yeah.
doesn't. You know,
But
so.
maybe well, and that's something. One place thing I wanted to mention that because tomorrow we're doing this tour on the ruins restored because I feel like there's still. You're right. Sometimes there's a focus on look at all these empty buildings still because there
Mhm.
are there's plenty obviously, but the success stories and I think knowing the success stories gives you the energy to keep working on the challenges that still exist. In
Right.
whatever realm it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
but the Opera
Great.
House is
Oh,
one that I really like. I mean, then this is pre Dan Gilbert. This is pre
oh
Loft
yeah.
Downtown. This is
That was back
pre,
in the 90s, right? Back
yeah.
in the
I mean, and David D. Chiara was the driving force
Mhm.
behind that, right?
Right. He was the visionary for that building. So, Detroit's theater district, that's a whole another discussion. And, all of our theaters around Grand Circus Park, that's
Right.
terrific discussion to have. I know I do worry about those places now that we've got the lockdown and people can't go to venues like that these days.
Right.
But hopefully I don't know what to think about how we'll get over and those venues can hang on for
Well,
paying their bills.
maybe the size of them, right? Obviously, being some of the larger historic theaters with the Fox and the Opera House. Maybe there's a way to be because they're so big that you could do every other seat, or every other
Mhm.
row and do like half capacity. I mean, I feel like they probably have a little bit more
Mm.
some space to work literally than maybe
Mm.
a Gem or Century, that with such a small
Yeah.
space, how would they do that? It would be curious.
Last weekend, Music Hall had an event in their parking lot, and I thought,
Yeah.
oh, they've got the beautiful, beautiful Music Hall theater there, and everybody's sitting around their parking
And
lot.
well, and
But,
you know what? The Madison
oh,
Lennox could have been there, right? Instead of that
right.
parking lot. And that was
Yeah.
2005 or six when that was. But I actually got to see Aretha Franklin perform her last
Uh,
performance as in that parking lot as
mhm.
the
So,
music hall had, started this, Detroit Music Weekend. So tell us a little bit more about how people can get involved in Detroit Area Art Deco Society, what you guys have coming up.
okay. Well, my group, Detroit Area Art Deco Society. Actually, we've got an event on Thursday. If you're not too sick of listening to my voice, I'm going to give a history of Detroit's tiki architecture and tiki buildings. And that's for a small little fee. I think it's about $7. And in addition to myself, the owner of Lost River, the tiki bar on the east side, is going to
So
speak. And
good.
he collects tiki, what do you want to call the paraphernalia, the tiki,
Yeah.
drink glasses and all of that. So I'll talk about architecture, and then Matt's going to talk about collectibles and the Lost River and what they're doing coming up.
Well,
So
maybe,
that's
yeah,
Thursday, yeah.
that's
Mhm.
Thursday. What time?
6.
Okay.
So daads.org and dads.org, and you'll have the information about that.
And you
Mhm.
can make yourself a little tiki drink. Maybe Lost
Right,
River will,
right. I need
they
to.
could maybe like tweet out or beforehand a
Yeah,
little recipe or something. I was
yeah.
not big on. I mean, I think that tiki drinks can get a bad reputation in terms of like you think of just all the sugar and
Sugary, yeah, they're just
powder, and
fake.
it's like at
Mm.
TGI Fridays or something. This is not that is not real tiki, and that's not Lost River. And I'm an East Sider, right? So
Okay.
when I first went to Lost River when it opened, it actually used to be where the Village Idiot Pub was. So if we're talking history, but this is a different kind of history, where I went when I was probably too young to be going
Oh,
to places. But Lost River is absolutely awesome, and tiki is really Detroit has a strong tiki history. The chin
yeah,
tiki, obviously, being a big one.
right.
So people should
Yeah,
definitely check that out. And
right.
the normally in non social distant times that you guys offer this amazing wine stroll that is
Oh,
very
right.
really great events in that hopefully people can get back to.
Yeah, so next year I'm hoping that we'll have the wine stroll back in place. I guess I'll picture it, wine stroll. So it's just promoting downtown restaurants and bars. We kind of based it off of a Royal Oak wine stroll that was really successful. And so ours is focused on downtown, and we've contacted every year. I think we've done this nine years or 9 times. So focusing on if you want to show people what downtown's bars and restaurants are like, that's a good way to do it.
Well, and a lot of them are in historic buildings, and it's,
Right.
and so it's that win-win. It's the architecture and wine. Who doesn't love that, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so
Right.
definitely, folks, make sure that you follow Detroit Area Art Deco Society, DAADS.
We're also on Facebook, of course. Yeah.
Yep, Facebook. Sign up to be a member. Nonprofits and that are need your support now, and this is a great way to do that because they're not being able to have some of their fundraising, traditional fundraising events. Also, we'll do a shout out just for Preservation Detroit if you're interested
Yep.
in history and architecture and saving. If there's a rally to save a building,
that's who does it. That's yeah, Preservation Detroit is the lead in taking on those kind of causes and really working to preserve Detroit's, endangered buildings. I think Jeanette froze up. I hope she comes back. Maybe she was wrapping things up. I'm not sure what
that you want to get behind.
Okay. You're kind of frozen in time, Jeanette, but thank you for this opportunity. I'm really glad to talk about it. And since you've been around the block like I have, I'm happy to I could talk about this all day. It really is my favorite subject. Did she come back?
I'm back.
Okay. I was just saying thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, that's all I wanted to do too. Join us, on DetroitExperienceFactory.org. You can sign up for any of our tours. Again, art and architecture is weekly. We're doing Best of Downtown in person again using headphones. Just you bring your phone and your headphone and we dial into a number. And so we're doing innovative ways of staying social distant, but still getting to appreciate and learn all about our building. So thank you so much for taking the time today, and thanks for all your work. You really did lay the groundwork for so much of what's happening today.
Thanks for saying that. Appreciate it.
All right, have a great day. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.